Hello everybody, this video is going to be another master game between Rubinstein as white against Nimzowitsch, who was black in this game. Was played in 1907, and to get right to it, white started with d4, black played d5, and a move still popular today, knight f3. So in this position there are various options, but Nimzowitsch chose e6. c4 was now played, Queen's Gambit, and black here declined the offer of a pawn by playing c5. White now played takes, black recaptured, and then knight c3. So this has transposed into a Tarrasch. Black played the usual response, knight c6, and now white played bishop f4. So, like Rubinstein likes to do, gets his bishop outside of the pawn chain. He could well, on his next move, play e3, and then instead of having a trapped bishop on c1, unable to do much, the bishop is instead on f4 and can later influence e5 or pin a black knight by going to g5 if black plays knight to f6. So here Nimzowitsch took, white recaptures. So Nimzowitsch here has given himself an isolated queen's pawn, which is quite double-edged in nature. What white will try and do is blockade the square in front of the pawn, so d4, which he is successfully doing. And what black will try and do is he will try and sort of use his pieces to gain lots of activity. And the pawn is controlling c4 and e4, so some players like to put their knights or other pieces around on those squares and be protected by the pawn. So here bishop b4 was played, and white then had several options, but e3 was played, just cementing the knight on d4. On a side note, if instead knight b5 was played, then black can play d4, and the white isn't completely lost here. White could play a3, but the reason behind knight b5 was to play knight c7 check. And here black has a very strong response. What would you play as black in this position? I'll give you 10 seconds to mull it over. Well, black can almost instantly win on the spot by playing queen takes, sacking the queen, bishop takes, and pawn takes c3. So here there's a discovered check being set up, and here white will have to surrender the queen back to black. And if you look at the position right now, white is down 2 pieces. So if white only gets a piece back for the queen, black will be a piece up. And it will be worse if white tries to retain the queen. So if queen d3, for example, then black can simply play c takes b2, check, king d1, and queen. Black gets the queen back, and I think there might even be a checkmate here. I think white's losing the queen after king c2 and knight d4 check, but there could be something even stronger. So anyway, back to the game, because this did not happen. e3 was played, as I said before. And now Black chose to play knight f6, developing a piece. Makes sense. And I feel White didn't really play the best move here. Rubinstein moved a piece he's already moved twice and took the knight on c6. I think instead bishop b5 might have been stronger, or bishop e2, maybe even bishop d3. Uh, Actually, no, never mind. No, not bishop d3. Bishop e2 would have been stronger, because you don't really want to repair black's pawn structure, and the knight's perfectly happy to blockade the pawn. It's a knight in the centre. It's perfectly happy. So bishop e2 would have been my move. Bishop b5 is also strong in creating a threat, but either move would have been good. But knight takes was played, and black's pawn structure is now somewhat repaired, but after b takes. Now bishop d3 was played, and castles. White castled, and here, after bishop d6, now that's an interesting retreating move here. Why didn't black develop instead? Well, the bishop on c8 doesn't have a perfect square yet. It doesn't have an ideal square. Bishop e6 might not have been as strong, and if bishop e6, I feel that it's not really pulling its weight. So you may as well improve a piece that you can get the maximum potential out of. And bishop d6 does challenge white's bishop on f4, and it also restricts the threat and control that the bishop on f4 has. Now rook b8 might be a possibility, attacking white's pawn on b2 and grabbing an open file or a semi-open file. So that's my theory behind why bishop d6 was played. Rubinstein didn't exchange; he retreated to g3, and now Nimzowitsch took, inflicting a slightly damaging structure onto white's pawns. H takes was played, capturing towards the centre, generally a good idea. And now c5 was played, so he's managed to get his pawns to work together side by side. And this is a structure known as hanging pawns, when neither one of the pawns has any other supporters, so the b and e pawns have vanished from the board. And here, pawns work best side by side, so what white will try and do is either provoke one of the pawns to step forward, and that will create a backward pawn, or white will try and exchange pawns, maybe by pushing his b pawn up or e pawn up, and then after the exchange of pawns, black will have an isolated pawn on either c5 or d5. And the final thing white will try and do is maybe attack one of the pawns, put lots of pressure on it, and try and just win one of the pawns, or again force one of them to step forwards. So that's white's aim. But what black is trying to do is consolidate and defend the pawns, try and keep them where they are. Also, the pawns do grant black a slight space advantage, so maybe black could use his pieces in a better way than white's, so improve the quality of the pieces. And finally, black might actually move one of the pawns forward if it achieves something, and what it achieves is more advantageous than the slight weakness of the backward pawn that it creates. So we'll see where the game goes from here. Rook c1 was played, so putting pressure on c5 and developing another piece. Bishop e6 was played, consolidating, defending the pawn. And now queen a4 was played, so it develops the queen. It makes way for the rook on f1 to come to d1 and pressurize the d file and the d5 pawn. And the queen does also have slight pressure against a7. So not a bad move. Black now plays queen b6, threatening the pawn and also letting d8 be used for one of his rooks. Queen a3 was played. Again, attacking and defending simultaneously. Good move. c4 was now played. So here, black felt that cramping the bishop on d3 and making it move was worth the weakness on d4 and the dark square, the lack of control of the dark squares. So we'll see if Nimzowitsch was correct in his assessment. Bishop moves back to e3, so eyeing the pawn on c4 and potentially moving to f3 to attack the pawn on d5. a5 was now played, so black is trying to operate on the queen side and throw up pawns to gain space. Rook fd1, queen b4. So black is now really trying to gain space, and there's a nasty bit of tension in the position where if white takes, then black can have three pawns side by side, attack the knight, and just have lots and lots of space and control of the queen side. And if black decides to take the queen on a3, white will then be forced to double his pawns and have doubled isolated pawns, and the c4 pawn will be a passer, a protected passer for that matter. So here it's very unpleasant for white, but there's a general rule which says that there's tension in that either, it's usually referred to with pawns, but either side can capture the other piece, and it's the rule says that the person who captures first generally has made a concession of some kind, so it's better just to keep this keep the option open of capturing, and only doing so if it gives you an advantage. So white doesn't take and black doesn't take for now. Rook d4, so occupying that weak d4 square and blockading. Rook fd8, rook cd1, so doubling and really trying to crack the d5 pawn. Rook d7, preparing to double on the d-file. Bishop f3. So white now has two rooks, a knight and a bishop attacking d5, four pieces attacking, and black needs to have at least as many pieces defending. So black only has three pieces defending the pawn, so he now gives a fourth defender with rook a d8. And here, if I was white, I would just try and make what are called passing moves. I don't think I can win this. I think I'm a little bit worse. But I don't think black really can break through at this point. So I would just make nothing moves that didn't really change the position, such as rook 1 to d2, maybe king f1. Yeah, just moves that just kept the status quo. But white doesn't do that. White instead plays knight b1, and I'm not sure why. It takes away an attacker on d5, and it just makes the knight worse. I think he was afraid of the doubling of the pawns on a3, but I'm not sure that would be sufficient to win for black. However, this move gives black the chance to attack on the queen side some more with rook b8. White makes the move rook 1 d2, defending. And now black does take, releasing the tension. But maybe it's advantageous. So after knight takes a3, king f8. So king f8 is an interesting move. It doesn't look like it achieves much. But what Nimzowitsch is sensing is that he will be able to swap off some pieces, and he'll have his king closer to the centre of the board. So in endgames, when there aren't many pieces left on the board, it's hard to say exactly how many pieces because uh, the context of the position changes game to game. It might be two pieces, it might be three, it might be one, it might be wait until there aren't any. But when there are hardly any pieces anyway, if your king is sort of close to the centre, it's active, it can do things, and there won't be enough left on the board to be afraid of being mated. So you may as well use your king as an attacking piece. And they say that an active king, or one that has a lot of mobility and can go after pawns or even pieces, a king is about as powerful as a rook or equivalent. So that's the point behind king f8, to march the king into the centre, perhaps after exchanging, or maybe even just marching the king all the way to c5 or d6 or e7 possibly. So white now plays e4. He's had enough of this cramping pawn structure on c4 and d5, so he wants to break up the pawn's connection. D takes, rook takes rook, knight takes rook, bishop takes pawn. So here it's now even in material, 3 pawns on the king's side each, 2 pawns on the queen's side each. And if you were looking at this position just glancing at it, you might think black is worse because his pawns are isolated and white's are side by side and therefore better structurally. But have a look at the pieces again. Black's king is a little bit more active than white's, it's closer to the centre. His bishop is guarding the pawn, his knight can jump in, and his rook is attacking the pawn on a semi-open file. So, and also it's black's turn to move, so he has a slight initiative here. Knight c5 was played, attacking the bishop, and it would be very embarrassing if white were to play bishop takes h7. If any of you have seen the Fischer-Spassky game, you might know why. What would happen after bishop takes h7? Yeah, g6. And now the bishop is trapped, and black can just play king g7 and king takes bishop. And white will have to give up his bishop. He'll probably have to play bishop takes g6 and give up his bishop for 2 pawns. So, not ideal for white. Instead, he played rook d4, which isn't the best move, but it's hard to find good options for white here. Black now took on e4, white captured, and black now takes the b2 pawn, and white keeps the material level with knight takes. So I think what Rubinstein was seeing was that black had a slight initiative, so he felt that if he could swap everything off, then it would be a fairly close to drawn endgame, because 3 pawns on the king side each, and both kings being on the king side, is basically a drawn game. But I'm not sure that is the case. What move would you now play as black in this position? Well, there are 3 good options. I think actually that Nimzowitsch made a very tiny error. Rook takes a2 is interesting, but I think that with the rooks on the board, it would be very, very hard to win because rook and pawn endgames are very tricky, and it's possible that Rubinstein might have found a way of drawing. So instead he played rook b4 in order to swap off rooks. But what I would have played is an intermediary move just to force the white king further away from the queen side, where I think all the activity is going to happen. I would have played rook b1 check, king h2, and now rook b4. So all that would have changed is the king would be on h2 instead of g1. And as it can't come to h3, it will take just one move longer to come all the way round to the queen side. Anyway, small nuances, but they can make a big difference in these sort of games. And in principle, it's better to have the king even further away from the centre than it already is. So white now has to move the knight, and black swaps off, and finally wins a pawn. So you may say, it's only a pawn, it's not too bad. I think white could draw this, but rook pawns, or rooks on the A or H file, are very hard to stop if you only have a knight to stop them. It's partly because there aren't so many squares in front of the pawn that the knight can get to. So it is tricky to stop a passed pawn, especially when there's a bishop backing it up. And there's a couple of options open here. The move I would have played, and probably fallen for the trap if it had been a blitz game, would be knight c5, hitting a4 and stopping the pawn moving, king e7, king f1, and if king d6, I might have played knight b7, thinking, yes, I've managed to draw this. I've got the fork. I'm going to win the pawn. Now all I have to do is just, keep my king where it is, and black can't really win. But what's wrong with knight b7? Yeah, it doesn't really win the pawn at all. After king c7 or king c6, white can just play. Black can just play after knight takes a5, king b6, and now the knight is trapped. And being a piece up, black should win this fairly comfortably. So instead of knight c5, knight c3 was played in the game. And here, my first instinct is different from what was played, but I understand why. I would have played bishop b3 so that I had a4 and a2 under guard, and would have just tried throwing the pawn up. But white can play knight b5 or knight b1 and blockade a3, so it wouldn't have been that effective. But Nimzowicz's move is better because bishop c4 stops the king coming in. And what Rubinstein has to do is move the f-pawn to allow the king to come to f2, and that gives black's king enough time to march over to the queen side. And now black's king is further up the board than white's king, so it's more active. And it does have threats here of coming to b4 and attacking the knight, and helping to shepherd the a5 pawn all the way up the board to a1. So white made a passing move with g4, black played king b4, and king d4 was played. So white's king is central, but the what's it called? I think it's been referred to as the center of gravity, like where all the activity is. It's no longer in the center of the board as it usually is in the opening and the middle game. Here, the center of gravity, the center of all the activity, is on the queen side, where black is trying to throw the pawn up. So really, black's king is closer to the action, and therefore is more active. The pawns on the king side aren't really going to work any miracles in the foreseeable future. So black plays bishop b3. So again, the idea, I think, is just to stop white having any tactical tricks, because what would have happened after a4? If black played a4, what would you play as white? Yeah, it's rather embarrassing, but knight takes a4. And now the position is basically drawn. Black can try and do something with his bishop, but then white's knight should be good enough to draw this game. So that that is not something Nimzowitsch wanted. He wanted to win, so he played bishop b3, preventing that little tactic, and white passed with g5, a4, knight b1. Here I would just play a3, a2 and be done with it, but I think Nimzowitsch was a bit of a perfectionist, or maybe he just wanted to toy with with Rubinstein. So bishop e6 was played, g3, king b3, knight c3, a3. Not so he doesn't want to swap knight for pawn. He wants to just try and promote and win this instantly. King d2. Sorry, d3. I mean g6. So preventing any pawn moves by white. And king d4 was played, but then king c2, and Rubinstein threw in the towel at this point. He's in Zugzwang, or in other words, he is in a position where he would want to just pass the turn, but you're not allowed to do that in chess. So any knight move will result in either black capturing the knight and then promoting, or simply just playing a2 and a1 queen. Any king move will lose the knight, and any pawn move will just result in losing a pawn. So that's why he resigned. The other move, king d2, would not be ideal, because a move I could just play would be a2, takes, and due to the pawn structure, black is just completely winning, because I don't even need to worry about white's king becoming active, because my bishop is guarding f7, and f7 is guarding g6, and white will not have enough to draw this. So, for example, here, if f5, black can simply play bishop takes, white will take on f7, and then for example, this is completely won, and then f5, the move I would play would just be bishop takes, king g4, king defends it, king f6, white king has to move away, king takes pawn, and this is just completely winning. Black can play king h4, and then just throw the pawn up, and will win quite simply. So that was the master game, Rubinstein versus Nimzowitsch. A very good win by Nimzowitsch there, very strong positional player. And thank you for listening and watching. Comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.